It's not just you. No one wants kids anymore. Let's go. Oh, I see. I was staring at the screen this whole time and didn't realize that it said U.S. fertility rate drops to another historic low. Well then.
The US fertility rate drops to another historic low. Births in Japan hit record low. Italy's national birth rate is declared a national emergency. Nearly
You know why? Because we're all working 9 to 5, 40 hours a week.
every country is due to shrink by 2100. There's little to no doubt that there's like an ongoing fertility crisis. People are choosing to not have babies anymore. From South Korea to the United States to Norway to Taiwan.
Holy shit! What? That is... Oh my god! Okay, like... What the heck? They went from 6 kids to like less than 1. They have half a kid.
On pretty much every rich country. And you might not think this is a problem, but it is a problem for a few reasons. The reality is that people are living longer than ever at the moment. When people start to live this long, you need new workers to replace the ones that are retiring. You need new workers to pay taxes that will eventually fund the pensions of those who retire. And you need young people in the workforce to take care of those older people. In the 1960s, there were 6 people of working age for every retired person. And by 2035, it's expected to be 2 to 1. This is one of those...
Oh my gosh! Oh, damn. Damn, that's like that's really bad. But they're doing nothing. They're not doing anything to encourage people to have kids. They're doing everything to encourage the opposite.
Those topics where if you ask 5 different people, you'll get 5 completely different answers as to what the reason is. People tend to have quite strong opinions. Some people might say it's a cost of living issue. Some people might say that it's to do with declining rates of religion in the world. Some people might blame women's liberation movements, for example. Either way, no matter what people say, they're typically pretty certain that either their experience or their belief is the reason why, on a global scale, people aren't having children. I think
like, okay, so no, I will not. For me personally, simply live in Poland and receive 800 PLN per month for each child you have from the government. Yeah, we have something like that here too. If you have kids, you get paid by the government monthly per kid. But for me personally, it is a cost of living issue. Now, I was sort of always on the fence of having kids. The biggest thing for me is obviously having the kid itself. I like the literal, just the thought of giving birth, like it can like paralyze me with anxiety from just thinking of it. But besides that, it is mostly a cost of living thing, because I feel like if we were able to afford a house big enough, number one, and not have all these stresses of, you know, not possibly being able to pay our bills, well, what if we can't pay rent? Oh my God, what about groceries? Like, if we didn't have all that stuff to worry about and we could just afford our basic needs and stuff, I feel like I probably would have been more inclined to have a kid by now. But there's just no way. There's no way. A 1-bedroom hole in the wall, you could not have a kid in the size of a 1-bedroom here, and that is $2,600 a month. And then if you want a 2-bedroom, which for me, I would need at least a 2-bedroom if I want to consider having a kid. Then you're looking at $3,000 or more a month for rent. So it's just no. This generation is more informed than any before, and they have deemed that having a kid is, check notes, too painful. Yeah. Yeah, like it just and and you so like God, how long? Friggin' 25 years ago, 30 years ago, you had a kid, okay? And one person could work and provide for the family, and the other person stayed home and raised the kids. Nowadays, I don't know who can. I think most people can't afford to do that. So then, both parents are now working, and you have to put your kid in daycare, which is like $4,000 a month. No joke. And so now you don't even get to spend much time with your kid. Your kid's being like raised by someone else. So like it doesn't make sense to me, like, to have a kid. That generation enjoyed the golden era of the US after we started aggressively regulating corporations. Yeah, like back then you could raise your own freaking kid and have time to spend with them and stuff, and nowadays it's like, oh yeah, let's have a kid and pay $4,000 a month to send them to daycare and have them raised by someone else.
We can do better than that, because when I see that there's a problem that is affecting Norway, the US, Taiwan, and France, I tell myself that there's got to be like a better answer that we can give, right? Because these countries are completely different. The childcare situation, for example, in Norway is vastly different to the childcare situation in the US, which is vastly different to the UK. So I feel like we can get a better answer than just this one line solution of, oh, it's the cost of living. I think we can do better. If you'd asked me, to be honest, like even just a couple of weeks ago, I would have put the blame squarely on the cost of housing. In fact, there's this one chart that lives like in my head rent-free.
Holy.
It's a chart that compares
what? Average UK house price. Average net family. What the? Bro. The income had stayed the same. And the housing is just like, like exploding.
the growth of house prices to the growth of incomes in the UK. And intuitively, to me, it feels like that's why people wouldn't want to have kids. And to a lot of people, it feels that way. But I want to challenge my intuition, and maybe we can reach a more nuanced answer as to why this is more of a global problem than necessarily a specific localized problem.
All right.
For example, this is a piece of research from the US, which tried to establish what the effect of a $10,000 increase in housing would be on people's decision to have kids. Unsurprisingly, if house prices go up, it corresponds to a 2.4% drop in the decision to have kids if you are renting. However, if you own your home, you actually become more likely to have kids as house prices go up. The net effect of this...
Well, yeah, because then you don't have to like worry about losing your house at any moment. Friggin', you could be living your best life, and then all of a sudden the friggin' landlord's like, oh, by the way, yeah, I want my house back, bye.
Is that when house prices go up in the US, more people actually want to have kids, which is really counterintuitive. But there is some variance, because in the UK, the effect of increasing house prices is a net decrease. And this is just one piece of evidence that immediately helps us understand that we can't just think of this problem as a one-line solution. Clearly, housing can't explain the full picture. I think the cost of having children is another huge factor that people typically fall back on when they explain the reasons why people aren't having kids. It's too expensive. However, it seems that even paying people to have kids isn't working very well. Taiwan is
What? Hold on.
spent more than $3 billion trying to get its citizens to have more children. And it's had
What? Oh my god, can you imagine the government coming up to you and being like, here you go, Hoshi, we'll pay you like $1,000 if you have a kid. No, you're gonna have to make that like 50,000 or like actually I think 50,000 wouldn't have make it like 100,000 and I'll consider it. Hello, Jewel. How you doing?
no success at all. In France, they've spent even more money, about 4% of their GDP, on various measures to encourage people to have children. To put this into perspective, if the US spent 4% of its GDP on family measures, that would be the equivalent of the entire defense budget. So countries are actually, some countries at least, are actually spending a huge amount of money on things like tax breaks, things like direct cash transfers, and things like childcare benefits to encourage people to have kids. So clearly there's a bit more to this whole situation than meets the eye initially. And I think we can maybe look at some of the research and evidence, because there is a whole body of research and evidence to engage with. And I've tried to find the best bits to share it with you. And I'm curious to hear what your opinions are on these different aspects. What I do find really interesting is like how the narrative has changed around this topic, because a couple of decades ago, overpopulation was all the rage. All of the discussion around the number of people on Earth revolved around the fact that there were too.
Oh my god. Can you imagine standing in that crowd? Ugh.
Too many people. And we have two people to blame for this. First of all, we have this dude here. His name is Thomas Malthus, and he is an 18th century economist. And he was the first major figure to really write about this idea of a population boom. He saw that the quality of life in 18th century England was dropping pretty quickly. And he said that there was just too many people and that we'd get to a point where there wouldn't be enough food to sustain the growing population. And a couple of decades later, another professor wrote about the same topic. His name was Paul Ehrlich, and he wrote a book called The Population Bomb. And people really believed them. To kind of put into perspective how scared people were of overpopulation, I want to share a quote by the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the US.
I remember this actually because it's something that I was like scared of too. I was like, oh my god. I was like, oh my god. The world's becoming too overpopulated and we're all going to starve and die.
You said that overpopulation could be more explosive than the atomic or hydrogen bomb. Even on the other side of the world, in China, these fears of overpopulation promoted China's decision to implement their one-child policy, the whole package of laws and regulations designed to stop Chinese people from having more than one child. If we fast forward to today, those fears were like clearly unfounded. I think most of us understand that food insecurity is a distribution problem and not an agriculture problem. And instead, we've ended up in the situation where underpopulation is the problem, whether or not...
They're like, okay, guys, okay, the world is becoming too populated. We need to scare everyone and make them really scared about this population problem, okay? And now now they're like, okay, we may have done that a bit too well, and we have nosedived in the opposite direction. Not a population problem, maybe a supply problem. Yeah, like, when you think about the amount of food, I can only imagine how much food from grocery stores gets wasted. And like I don't even want to think about it because it's probably so freaking much. So yeah, like, I don't know. Is it a supply problem? Or is it that it, you know, the supplies that we could be using for everyone, it's just going to waste instead? Ever seen Rango? Oh, frig. I seen Rango, but like, I just, so long ago, I don't remember it. I don't remember it.
Not enough young people. And I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the US specifically, because I think they've got some really interesting factors that paint a different picture of the fertility crisis to the one that you might have in your head at the moment. This is a graph of the US fertility rates, and it's the kind of graph that makes you want to jump to a specific conclusion or a one-line answer as to what's going on here. But
oh, damn. Holy shit, the fertility rate dropped. The leader hoards the water so everyone thinks there isn't enough to go around. Yes, yes. Exactly. Because if you take all that food that's being wasted in grocery stores and stuff, ooh, it would be a lot. You could feed a lot of people. But holy shit, look at that fertility rates because of all the freaking shit. It's all the shit that these ultra processed foods and all that stuff.
But the real interesting part of this graph isn't what it looks like now. It's what it looks like when you kind of break it down by demographics. And thankfully, The Economist has done this for me. If we look at birth rate divided by age, we see some really interesting trends. Somewhat surprisingly, the fertility rate amongst women over 30 has actually been steadily rising since the 1990s. However, you might see something else that's quite interesting. Birth rates amongst 15 to 19-year-old women in the US dropped dramatically. The actual figure is 77%. And they actually explain that more than half of the drop in America's total fertility rate is driven by women under 19 choosing to no longer have kids. Around a third of these births would have been unplanned, and the majority of these births would have been on low incomes as well. In the UK, we actually see a similar trend where women at age 20 are having half as many children. Unlike richer women, these young women are not going to compensate by having more kids in the future. And I actually want to take a brief second to have a little aside and talk about the fact that often the most vilified group of people are actually the most important group of people to society. I'm sure you've heard
Isn't that the truth? Oh no, our children are not having children while they're still children. What will we do? What will we do? Oh.
Single mothers described as a burden on society or as lazy. But clearly these women were actually like the backbone of the economy. It's an aspect that I feel many people don't actually think about. Obviously, it would be unreasonable to say that the reason that no one is having kids is purely because teen pregnancies are down. The economic aspect of it is clearly important. It's clearly relevant. I don't think it's a coincidence if you look in this graph that the countries that have the lowest fertility rate in Europe, countries like Italy, Spain, and Greece, are also the countries with the highest youth unemployment, the countries where young people live with their parents for the longest, and the economy is in the bin, basically. And if you just ask young adults why they're not having kids, a lot of them will say that it's simply because childcare is too expensive.
Because I don't want to pay $4,000 a month for freaking daycare, okay? Why were more children born in the past? Because there was no electricity and no internet and people had nothing to do with their free time? You know what? I would believe it. I would believe that. you were, you didn't really have a whole lot to do, so people were more, there was more community with people compared to nowadays. Everyone has their phone and their face in their phones, communicating on the internet, which is terrible. And then compare that to back when you had much more community. You interacted with people in person more than you did over the internet and stuff. Person who lacks purpose distracts themselves with pleasure. Yeah. Yes.
What I find interesting, though, is that the fertility crisis is one that affects the whole world, and it affects countries that spend an incredible amount of money on social programs for kids. So this is a quote by Robert Reich. If you don't know who Robert Reich is, he was US Secretary of Labor. He says that Norway spends around $30,000 per child on early childhood care. Finland spends $23,000. Germany spends $18,000.
Damn.
And the US spends $500 per child.
What? And the US boasts we're like they're one of the richest countries. What is this shit? What? What?
Obviously, the US has a huge childcare spending problem. It just doesn't want to invest in young children. But Norway, which is spending incredible amounts on early childhood care, is still seeing a below replacement birth rate. And when we talk about this problem, we tend to lump men and women in together as if their experience of having children is identical, when there are actually some pretty significant differences that can at least help us explain some more of the trend towards choosing to not have children. And one of these big factors is the fact that women's earnings drop significantly after having a child, and that drop persists decades after they have children. This is not so much of a problem for men. Men who choose to have kids don't earn significantly less than men who don't choose to have kids, and they don't also experience a short-term drop in the amount that they earn. Gender-based differences in terms of the experience of childcare, I think, are a remarkably important factor because...
Yeah, because... Because whether people like to admit it or not, the women are usually the ones who it still falls to them, where they're the ones who are more expected to take on the childcare stuff. So like if something happens, she's the one that has to leave work and go get the kids, or she takes her maternity leave and all that stuff. Which is fine. You know, it's fine if that's what the couple agrees on. So, whatever. But yeah, I think it still does childcare does still mostly fall to the woman. 10 euros for a small beer. Damn. I haven't been out drinking in so long, so I don't even know what the prices of like alcohol are here right now. I just know it's very absurdly expensive, so yeah. Dads will get weird looks for helping their own children. You know what I hate the most? I absolutely hate it when the wife goes out and they're like, oh yeah, my husband's at home babysitting. No. Your husband is at home taking care of your kids. He is not babysitting. Drives me insane when anyone says that. You are not babysitting your kids, you're taking care of your kids. There's a perception that all adult men with kids are predators, sadly. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really like looked into that topic, but yeah, I know that generally like people are more suspicious of men for whatever stupid reason.
Ultimately, you need two people to have a child. This tracks with the work of Dr. Matthias Dupke. He's like the guy to talk about family economics. It's his like area of specialty. He talks at length about the differences between low fertility countries and ultra low fertility countries. In the countries that have the lowest levels of fertility, there is a clear trend of women taking on a greater percentage of the burden of childcare. So in the really low fertility countries, the percentage of childcare duties that is taken on by women can be as high as 80%. In countries that have slightly better fertility ratios, this percentage is much closer to 50-50. There's still a huge stigma in some of these countries, particularly South Korea and Japan, where women are still expected to spend huge amounts of time at home taking care of children.
Yeah.
But they can't survive without having a career, or they simply just want a career, which is also very reasonable.
Yeah, because like who wants to work full time and then come home and then you're still the one expected to do the dishes, take care of the kid, put the kid to sleep, cook dinner, clean up after the kid, clean up this, clean up that. No. No. Not how things work. But you're babysitting us right now? It's okay. It's okay. This is Hoshi's babysitting session. I think babies are adorable, but I'm scared to say things to women or parents in stores because I don't want to be seen as a creep. I'm scared to talk to kids just in general. I don't know why. I don't know why, but I feel weird talking to kids. It's like I don't know how to... A kid comes up to me and starts talking and I suddenly don't know how to communicate. I have never been so happy that children terrify me. Like a kid just comes up to me and is like, hi, and I'm like, where's your mom? Where's your dad? Why are you talking to me? Social anxiety made me punt the kid over the fence. Oh gosh. That's why I don't like children. Yeah. I don't know why. But it's also that fear of like how people are sometimes with their kids. Like if you talk to their kid or something, they'll be like, "Oh my god, why are you talking to my kid?" Or like like I don't know, or if like you say something wrong, then they'll get mad at you or whatever. I don't know. It's very slightly that, but mostly just I for some reason lose my ability to communicate when a kid is trying to like talk to me.
To have kids is in some extent a signal of optimism, right? A signal in the belief that you'll have a good future, your kid will have a good future, and the world on the whole has a good future ahead of it. And I think these
yeah, well, let's I don't know how that's looking right now, so yeah, I could see that being a reason. This is exactly why I got the snip as soon as I was able to. Yeah, see, for women, they still use this bullshit thing where they're like, well, we can't, remove your uterus because what if you meet a man? What if you meet a man and that man wants kids? Well, I don't know. Sounds like I wouldn't be with that man and that man should find someone who wants kids. Well, I give a shit if they want kids. I don't, so sounds like we're incompatible. I don't know. Holy shit.
These disparate factors all play into a single idea of optimism about the world. There's a really good research group called Our World in Data. They're amazing. They compiled some data on how optimistic people feel about the world. And you can see that there's this concentration of rich, low fertility countries at the bottom of this graph. And I think it helps us at least explain somewhat why the countries that are even trialing just direct one-off cash payments are not seeing remarkable improvement.
South Korea has so few babies, it is offering new parents $10,500. Wow. They actually hit me with the same thing I told them I was kidding. Well, that's one way to get around it. It's one way to get around it. Oh my god. I'm glad you were able to get it done, though. Honestly. Very glad you were able to get that done. If it makes you happy.
Giving someone a one-off payment doesn't necessarily make them feel like the world is going to be a better place in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
No.
On the other hand, places like Taiwan have tried extended maternity leave, and that hasn't worked because that has actually increased the risk for women. they're going to be out of the workforce for longer and they're going to struggle to recover the income that they once had. There are these macro factors like the gender wage gap, which are kind of creating like a negative pressure, and it's not enough to balance that negative pressure. But importantly, it's also worth mentioning that a lot of the drop in fertility is actually a good thing. It represents that people have agency. People can actually choose whether or not to have children, especially women. In fact, we use the term fertility crisis when it's not really a fertility crisis, it's a worker crisis. Governments aren't trying to create self-actualized, happy, positive individuals.
Yeah.
They're trying to create meat for the grinder.
Meat for the grinder. Meat for the grinder. No, like, people are working themselves to death and they're unhappy, they're depressed, they have nothing to show for the amount of work that they're doing. So why the hell would you want to have kids and just add to the amount of stress that you're already dealing with on a daily basis? If you want people to have kids, then you need to promote a well-balanced work life thing. And people need to be working where they're able to have their basic needs and stuff and be happy. That's what makes people want kids. In my opinion.